Now, a special report from KARE 11 Investigates.
I'm due a refund.
The VA secretly keeps hundreds of millions of dollars
That's crazy.
belonging to disabled veterans.
It's mind-boggling.
A Marine denied a life-saving transplant,
I want to live.
and his race played a role.
It says it's a biased system.
Plus, veterans wrongly saddled with millions in medical debt.
Why? Why would they do that to all these veterans?
KARE 11 Investigates. Mission critical.
Thanks for joining us. I'm investigative reporter AJ Legault. We believe that journalism that holds the government accountable to promises made to veterans is a critical mission. This year, our reporting helped put a lot of money back in veterans' pockets and, more importantly, help save a life. We begin tonight with an investigation that exposed the VA secretly keeping $400 million that belonged to disabled veterans. For many Twin Cities veterans, the Uptown VFW is home away from home.
So I've got friends.
Ask around here, and it's not hard to find veterans like James McLeodon,
Desert Storm and in Operation Just Cause,
who've bought an actual home using one of the biggest benefits available to those who've worn our nation's uniform, the VA Guaranteed Home Loan Program. Here's why it's such a deal.
In addition to no down payment, these loans typically save you money due to competitive interest rates and limited fees charged at closing.
it's a fantastic program. I can't even tell you how many people would never have homes without this.
But KARE 11 Investigates discovered the program, widely praised for opening the door to home ownership for millions of veterans, had a secret. What I'm handing you is a report that came out in 2014. The report originated inside the Whipple Federal Building at the VA's St. Paul Regional Loan Center, where it's been an open secret for years. But for veterans,
This is scary, man.
it's a bombshell.
This is sad. This is, wow.
Internal VA records KARE 11 obtained from a whistleblower revealed between 2006 and 2014, VA inappropriately collected approximately $150 million on more than 47,000 loans. Here's how it happened. A veteran using the VA Home Loan Program is required to pay what's called a funding fee, up to 3.3% of the loan amount. If you're a disabled vet, that funding fee gets waived. But there's a glitch. If a veteran has only applied for a disability rating and the claim is still pending when they get their VA loan, they have to pay the funding fee. That can add up to several $1,000s. But if their disability claim is approved later, they're due a refund of that funding fee. That's money that's yours. You paid it.
Exactly.
But KARE 11's investigation discovered veterans like Roger Roth haven't always gotten those refunds.
$10,065? That's a lot of money.
Top VA officials in D.C. were warned veterans were owed this money back in 2014. VA employees from Minnesota even proposed an action plan to fix the problem and repay veterans.
Getting a VA home loan.
But Mike Frew, the former director of the VA loan program, and Jeff London, the current director, sat on that information for the last 5 years, doing nothing to repay veterans unless the veteran knew to ask for the refund.
But unless you asked for it, they didn't give it to you.
That's crazy.
And it's mind-boggling that they felt the veterans needed to contact them as opposed to getting the money back to them.
Michael Missel is the VA's Inspector General.
They knew they were holding money that belonged to veterans, but never told them?
Correct.
Why didn't VA leaders address this?
We asked them that question, and they said it wasn't a priority for them.
It became a priority after KARE 11 began asking questions, and veterans like Andrew Ganfield, who watched our reporting,
I'm due a refund.
began demanding what was rightfully theirs.
Over $10,000.
Andrew called the St. Paul VA Loan Center
Hello, Mr. Gant.
and got this message back.
It appears that you are probably due a refund for the 2012 loan.
Had you not made this report, we would have never been the wiser. And that would have just been money gone.
This was a nationwide problem.
Missel's office issued a scathing report concluding veterans may have suffered significant financial losses. And because senior VA officials had failed to act, the number of veterans being shortchanged continued to grow.
We are aware that approximately 130,000 veterans are due a refund.
Congress quickly introduced bipartisan legislation to ensure impacted veterans were made whole.
The importance of introducing the legislation is to make sure that we fix the problem that you uncovered.
Finally, after years of delay, in October, the VA announced it has paid back more than $400 million to those 130,000 disabled veterans nationwide. VA Secretary Robert Wilkie said in a statement, this effort included loans dating back nearly 20 years. Our administration prioritized fixing the problems and paid veterans what they were owed.
Everything's all right.
Back at the Uptown VFW, they question why it wasn't done years ago.
This is, I just don't think people understand how this affects the average veteran. Like, they're not millionaires, they don't have boats. I mean, every single dollar matters.
The average refund was more than $4,000. Some were as high as $20,000. Still ahead is bias behind a veteran being denied a kidney transplant.
So the whole thing just stunk.
When Mission Critical continues. Welcome back to Mission Critical. For the past 3 years, we've been investigating the VA's organ transplant program. Our latest reporting exposed VA testing discriminated against a Native American in life-threatening ways. 5:30 a.m. on the longest day of the year. The sun already up on the Leech Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota as 66-year-old Frank Sherman leaves home on an all-too-familiar trip.
This is what I do for 3 days a week.
Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for more than 3 years.
This is my life.
Frank had a date.
I never missed a day here.
With the dialysis machine.
If I stop doing it, I ain't gonna be here no longer.
The dialysis, doing the job Frank's failing kidneys no longer could.
Time is wasting.
Dr. Jason Bidash was Frank's nephrologist. He says the average lifespan of a dialysis patient is 5 years.
Without a transplant, is this a death sentence?
Yes.
Frank was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. The VA lists his kidney problems as service-connected, likely caused by Camp Lejeune's contaminated water. But when it comes to putting Frank on the kidney transplant list, the VA refused.
So the whole thing just stunk.
Hugh Quinn retired as Itasca County's Veterans Service Officer. Frank's transplant denial haunted him.
Yep. Why? I don't want to see Frank die.
Quinn reached out to KARE 11 in 2018 about Frank's case. He'd been following our investigation exposing deadly delays, dubious denials, and prohibitive travel requirements in the VA organ transplant program that a VA whistleblower claimed was costing lives.
How many patients do you think unnecessarily died because of this system?
Thousands.
The reporting sparked Congress to write new legislation.
This is again one of those things that's just smart, all in the interest of the best care for our veterans.
President Trump signed reform measures into law as part of the VA Mission Act, promising veterans could get transplants closer to home and giving more control to their primary care doctor.
Yes.
In Frank's case, his primary care physician at Cass Lake Hospital, Dr. Becker, wrote, there is no valid reason for him not to be selected for a transplant. The Minneapolis VA's chief of nephrology referred to Frank as an average risk candidate for a kidney transplant. Dr. Bidash concurred.
I think that he would make a good transplant candidate.
So why, in spite of those doctors' opinions, is Frank being denied a transplant? The VA says it's because he's not mentally alert enough to follow medical instructions. In a letter to Senator Amy Klobuchar, Minneapolis VA Director Patrick Kelly explained the primary reason for the denial. The VA claimed because of limited functional status and significant neurocognitive deficits, Frank was not an acceptable candidate. Dr. Bidash thought the VA made a life-threatening mistake.
Frank, in my opinion, does not have significant neurocognitive deficits.
Frank's regular doctor in Cass Lake agreed, writing of the claim that Frank has cognitive impairments. This is simply not true. And Frank's Indian Health Services social worker wrote, he has an excellent memory.
We've got a great candidate for a kidney transplant. Get it done. Quit screwing around.
So, What was the basis of the VA's claim of significant neurocognitive deficits? We found the answer buried in Frank's records. He was given a pair of neuropsychological evaluations to determine whether he could care for himself post-transplant. Frank failed.
That I can't remember things.
Frank says he was asked to recall lists of words and names, but struggled because he doesn't read well since he grew up speaking Ojibwe. What's more, the test included words he says he'd never heard before.
Because you don't know a word, they think that's a memory. It's not a memory. It's a word you don't know.
When KARE 11 dug through Frank's VA test records, what we found raised serious questions about their accuracy and fairness, including these notes. Patient performance was scored on Caucasian norms due to lack of Native American norms available, and cross-cultural factors may have contributed to suppressed performance. But they denied him anyway.
What does that say to you?
It says it's a biased system.
When KARE 11 contacted the VA about Frank's case, they defended their testing, claiming the suggestion it discriminates against Native Americans is completely false, offensive, and defamatory. But after KARE 11's report on Frank aired, the VA gave Frank a new evaluation. To the surprise of no one who knows him, it stated, current exam results do not support a diagnosis of major neurocognitive disorder. In other words, Frank's memory is fine.
Long time since I've been on a plane.
And there's good news. The VA then flew Frank to their transplant facility in Pittsburgh for pre-transplant prep work.
Mr. Sherman, thanks so much for flying with us and have a safe trip.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
He had no guarantee of transplant, but after years of denial, Frank was finally headed in the right direction.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Hope became reality in August 2019. After a 6-year delay, Frank's phone rang.
I got my call, and they wanted me on a plane right away.
The veteran called us from his hospital bed at the VA Pittsburgh Transplant Center. He'd received his new kidney.
Surgery went really, really good. Everything went right the way it was supposed to. I just thank the Lord for this.
Coming up, veterans saddled with millions in medical debt they should not owe.
Why would they do that to all these veterans?
Mission Critical continues after the break. Welcome back. You're about to see how our 3-year investigation exposed perverse incentives for VA employees to get their work done fast, leaving veterans nationwide saddled with millions of dollars in medical debt they should not owe.
So we were cutting wood, put a log on the splitter.
Bill George was prepping for winter when it happened.
I was screaming out the top of my lungs. My hand got crushed in the wood splitters.
An Army veteran, Bill normally gets all his medical care at the St. Cloud VA, but it was closed. So his family rushed him to the small Meeker Memorial ER. They took one look and put him on an ambulance to HCMC.
The skin was torn open. They could see the tendons when I got to the emergency room.
He was x-rayed, stitched up, and released. He'd later need multiple surgeries to repair his hand. But the pain didn't end there. Despite federal law mandating VA pay for most veterans' emergency medical bills, VA refused to pay.
Why? It makes no sense.
VA sent him this denial letter. It claimed services were not provided in an emergency department. But get this, on the same letter, it says the bill came from the Hennepin County Medical Center ED. That's emergency department.
In black and white, right away it was from Hennepin County Emergency Department, but yet I was denied because I wasn't seen in an emergency department. It's like it was never even reviewed.
Listen to veterans, and it's a story.
It's not right.
We've heard
The bill is over $1,200.
Over and over.
I was getting collection calls.
Back in 2017, a KARE 11 investigation exposed why, in Minnesota and across the country, the VA was issuing seemingly bizarre denials, refusing to pay the medical bills for veterans who went to private hospitals in emergencies.
We were told to pick and click. and get them moving.
Whistleblowers told us they were pressured to process claims quickly at the expense of accuracy.
Is it faster to just deny?
Always.
Then Congressman, now Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, was watching.
And when you point out a story like I saw that you ran, I think it warrants looking at it.
He sent this letter referencing KARE 11's reporting to VA Inspector General Michael Missel.
Congressman Walz asked you to look for perverse incentives.
Correct.
Did you find any?
We found incentives that were inappropriate.
Missel's office recently released this report. The incentives found were bonuses, overtime opportunities, and telework privileges.
VA was looking to process these claims as quickly as possible, and they set up incentives to do so.
OIG even found a damning report quoting a VA officer stating, "I don't want to say accuracy doesn't matter, but accuracy doesn't matter."
So in essence, what they were doing was quantity over quality.
Speed before accuracy?
Correct. And as a result, they made a number of mistakes, which costs veterans millions of dollars.
So, how often were cases mishandled? The OIG audited 6 months of claims. At the Minneapolis and St. Cloud VAs, they found 47% of the claims denied were inappropriate. In other parts of the country, it was as high as 70%. OIG found 17,400 veterans had improperly denied bills totaling $53.3 million. Remember, that's in just 6 months. These denials took place for years.
We believe that if you extrapolate it out, that the numbers would be similar.
The OIG investigation discovered another troubling aspect to this pattern of denial. When veterans' ER claims were rejected or put on hold, the VA often failed to even notify the veterans.
Look at these photos investigators took showing denial letters piling up in VA claim centers. Sometimes they piled up for years. OIG says that means hundreds of thousands of veterans may not have been able to appeal the bad denials before time ran out.
The VA just ignored the mail.
The VA ignored more than just the mail. Referencing KARE 11's reporting, a federal appeals court ruled the VA also ignored the law.
The reason I'm bringing up this shocking development is news reports just this past Friday from Minnesota.
That part of the story coming up on Mission Critical.
Screaming at the top of my lungs.
Before the break, we told you about Bill George, a veteran whose hand got mangled in a wood-splitting accident.
My hand was busted.
The VA initially refused to pay his ER bills, claiming he was not seen in an emergency department, despite his bills clearly showing he was seen in HCMC's emergency department. They used that ER denial then as a basis to deny paying for his ambulance ride. Bill appealed.
I was denied again. Just denial letter after denial letter.
But this time, the VA had a new reason. They claimed they didn't have to pay because he had other health insurance. Bill's private insurance through his employer did pay a portion of his bills, but he was still left with more than $2,200 in expenses.
I got a collection notice. At that point, I borrowed the money so I could get it taken care of. I didn't want my credit to be ruined.
Denials like this are the subject of a class action lawsuit before the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, where a panel of judges skewered the VA for its failure to properly reimburse veterans for emergency medical care bills.
Congress passed a law. Well, if you go to an emergency room, you're entitled to reimbursement. That's what we ruled in Staub.
Interesting.
No exceptions.
The Staub ruling the judge mentioned is the case of Minnesota veteran Richard Staub. After the VA denied payment, the St. Cloud man got stuck with more than $47,000 in medical bills following a heart attack and stroke.
What did that do to your finances, having to try to...
Goes down, you know.
He eventually won a landmark legal case against the VA, but as KARE 11 exposed, it did him little good.
The reason I'm bringing up this shocking development is news reports just this past Friday from Minnesota indicating the state of affairs for Mr. Staub.
Despite 3 years going by, we reported Mr. Staub hadn't been paid a dime. And if he dies before the VA pays up, his lawyer says his kids have no legal standing to claim the money.
I don't know how long I got to live. No one does.
3 years, nothing's happened, not a dollar. What do we have to do?
Why hasn't Mr. Staub been paid? The current lawsuit claims the VA is trying to get around the Staub decision, denying ER bills by claiming the charges left over after insurance are, in effect, the same as co-pays. The judges were outraged.
Co-payment. $20, not $20,000 or $48,000. This is an important concept. Congress didn't put that in. You people put it in.
In a September ruling, the court found the VA's position patently absurd. The ruling says all of this is unacceptable, and the VA must pay what's left over on a veteran's ER bill, even if they have other insurance.
This is big.
Bart Stitchman is the lawyer who sued the VA.
And it's billions of dollars, the VA says, that they'll now have to pay.
If the court ruling stands, billions in reimbursements will need to be made to hundreds of thousands of veterans like Richard Staub and Bill George, who question why the government they served denied them in their time of need.
Why? Why would they do that to all these veterans?
The VA says it's instituted reforms, but that may not be the end of the story. Congressional sources tell us they're planning to hold hearings on these bad ER denials in 2020. On behalf of the KARE 11 investigative team, thanks for watching Mission Critical.